Imagine being in a position where you had to flee for your life, but no matter how covertly you moved or where you went, the person you were running away from always managed to find you in a matter of days. Today's story will take you through that horrifying experience, so make sure you watch until the end to find out how this was possible. And if you like today's story, then please hit the like and subscribe button and click all of the notifications so you don't miss any of our uploads. And if you find the secret hidden in the background and you are the first person to comment on its time and location, then we will pin you to the top of the comments. Okay, let's get into the story. At 17 years old, Nicole Legger was a beautiful young woman who had gone through a few of life's difficulties already. Specifically, she was unmarried and pregnant. So, to make ends meet after her son was born, she spent a bit of time dancing in strip clubs. Over the years, though, things were starting to look up for Nicole. And by the time she was in her 30s, her son was in high school, she was working as an assistant for a stockbroker, and she had met a wonderful man by the name of Mike Adams, who treated her like an angel. Mike was quite a bit older than Nicole by about 16 years. He earned a decent living working as a repo man, repossessing cars when people didn't make their payments, and he lived in Frisco, Texas. As their relationship progressed, Mike eventually asked Nicole and her son to move in with him. To Nicole, this sounded wonderful. She was ecstatic because, after all, when Nicole and Mike first started dating, he was a perfect gentleman. He would bring her flowers and write her love notes, telling her how beautiful and perfect she was. Mike was a perfect gentleman, so it seemed obvious that living with him would be the logical next step. And so Nicole and her son moved in shortly after. What Nicole didn't know at the time, but would soon learn, was just how particular Mike was. Mike was obsessive and meticulous with his home and his belongings. So much so that all of the items in the closets, cupboards, and fridge had to be turned so that the label was facing him when he opened the door to that space. And that wasn't the only thing Mike insisted on. He owned a pool table that nobody was allowed to use. It was strictly for decor, and the same went for a circular-shaped white couch that he owned. Nobody was allowed to touch it at all because of the chance that it might get dirty. This same level of order was applied to his extensive gun collection as well, which was sorted by caliber. Nicole's happy idea of what it would be like to live with Mike soon turned into a nightmare after one evening when Nicole's son accidentally spilt his dinner on the floor. And Mike lost his mind over the mess. A rant that went on for over a week ensued, so Nicole and her son moved out after less than 2 months of living there. The yelling was just too much, and way more than Nicole was willing to live with. Now, when Nicole moved out, this left Mike feeling a little at odds with how she seemed to have controlled the whole situation. Mike wasn't used to being the one on the losing end of a situation, and so he thought to himself that he would get her to come back to him, and this time he would sweeten the deal. Mike asked Nicole to go out for dinner with him so he could at least apologize for the way he acted, and so she agreed and met him at a nice restaurant where he proceeded to apologize up and down, pleading for her forgiveness, swearing that he would never yell at her ever again. And then after all of his apologizing, he got down on one knee and asked her to marry him. Nicole had high hopes, and Mike seemed to have recognized where he had gone wrong the first time they had lived together. So Nicole, looking at this massive engagement ring, said yes to his proposal, and then she and her son moved back in with Mike. But as they say, a tiger doesn't change his stripes, and almost immediately after moving back in, the arguments began again, and they were growing in intensity. The yelling got so heated that during an argument, Mike forcefully ripped the engagement ring from Nicole's finger, resulting in a trip to the hospital because he had broken her finger in the process. After this, they moved out again. And this time, they weren't going back. But as much as Nicole tried to move forward with her life and leave Mike behind, it seemed like someone was set on making her life as unpleasant as possible. Not long after she had left Mike, she came home from work to find that her front door to her house was wide open and her dog was missing. And then a few days later, she found out that her dog had been hit by a car and sadly died from its injuries. And then after that, she came home from work only to discover that someone had broken into her house again and destroyed all of her clothes by pouring bleach on them. And then the grand finale of all of this harassment was when her car mysteriously caught fire while it was parked outside of her apartment. Of course, Nicole had suspected Mike of all of this vandalism, but she had no way of proving it, and now that her car was destroyed and she couldn't afford a new one on her own, she didn't really think too much into it when Mike conveniently showed up to offer to co-sign a loan for her so that she could get a new car. This way, he thought, he looked like a hero in her eyes. He was the man coming to rescue her, and since Nicole didn't see any other option, she accepted his offer. So with Mike's help, Nicole was able to purchase a new vehicle. But in March of 2013, she was ready to take over the car. So she drove to Mike's house with the title to the car so that he would sign it off and the car would be hers. And then she thought he could get out of her life. However, Mike seen this visit as an opportunity to maybe smooth things over with Nicole. So while she was there, he made her a nice, delicious smelling plate of spaghetti, knowing full well it was her favorite meal. He claimed he was trying to make peace, but peace was the last thing on his mind. Not long after Nicole had taken those first few bites of that delicious plate of spaghetti, she started to feel the effects of the drug Mike had spiked the spaghetti with, which resulted in incapacitating her for a few hours. The drug took some time for full effect, and Nicole remembered being walked into the bedroom and Mike taking her clothes off. And this whole time, Nicole was saying no, but she was unable to stop anything from happening because of the drugs. She couldn't move her arms or legs or anything. All she could do was lay there and hope that Mike would come to his senses and stop whatever he had planned to do. But he didn't. Instead, he posed Nicole's nude body in different positions and began taking pictures of her, and then she passed out. When Nicole woke up, she found that she was still nude, tied up, and gagged. Looking around, she noticed that Mike was nowhere to be seen, so immediately she began struggling against the restraints, and eventually she was able to work herself loose to the point that she was able to escape. As soon as she was loose, she bolted out the door and ran straight to the neighbor's house, but Mike was too quick. When he heard her scream for help, he jumped up and managed to grab her and drag her back into his garage before anybody else noticed what was happening. In the garage, Mike put down a large plastic tarp on the floor, handcuffed her, and bound her ankles with zip ties. Anger consumed him, and he tried ripping her hair out in large handfuls, but couldn't get it to come out, so he started slashing at it with a knife. By this time, Nicole had been held captive for a full 24 hours, and she was quickly beginning to realize that the only way she was going to get out of this alive was to reason with Mike, and so she began to plead with him, telling him that if he let her go, she promised to stay with him and that they would go to couples counseling together, and she would also promise that she wouldn't go to the police or press charges against him. And after what seemed like hours, Mike finally began to soften and then finally agreed to everything she was saying. And then he released her. But as soon as Nicole was free from Mike, she drove directly to the hospital and reported the assault to the police, pleading with them to lock him up, telling them that he was going to end up killing her. The police made their way over to Mike's, where they searched his house and car, and in the trunk of the car, they found what they were looking for. They found the zip ties, the duct tape where their hair still attached, and the camera used to take the photos. They also found the jar of the spiked spaghetti sauce that still had some inside the jar because the jar hadn't been washed yet. The amount of evidence found was enough for the police to make an arrest of Mike on charges of aggravated indecent assault and unlawful restraint, but he easily made bail and was a free man awaiting trial. Because of his release, Nicole was granted an emergency protective order and Mike was ordered to have zero contact with her. Nicole also moved out of the county and used an alias to rent a home and set up utilities in an effort to prevent Mike from finding her. But somehow, one day, Nicole received flowers at her home that were delivered to her, and the flowers were from Mike. She could not, for the life of her, figure out how on earth he was able to track her down. On another day, she came home to find a tarp and handcuffs on her front porch. He was clearly still upset with her for going to the police after she told him she wouldn't, and now he was trying to intimidate her so that she wouldn't testify against him for drugging and assaulting her. In August of 2013, Nicole and her son took off to Florida to spend time with Nicole's parents. Her father pleaded with her to stay with him, but Nicole didn't listen, and sadly, her father watched as she drove away back to Texas for the last time. On September 9, 2013, Nicole's 17-year-old son returned home from school to find his mother dead, her body laying nude, face down on her bed with 2 gunshot wounds to her face. During the investigation, the crime scene investigators recovered 2 used condoms at the scene, but both of them had DNA that did not match Mike or anyone in the police database. However, Mike failed to prevent contamination with his own DNA, and the police found it on the outside of one of the condoms. And while working for a vehicle repossession company, Mike had used a GPS tracking device that he attached to Nicole's car to track her every move. And during the investigation, the police seen that on Mike's work computer, he had been tracking her using the GPS system and had searched for routes to her new home that she had tried so hard to keep secret. Police promptly arrested Mike Adams and charged him with capital murder, to which he was found guilty and was sentenced to life in prison without any possibility of parole. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. Thank you for watching, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our Creepyville stories. If you have any story suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. And if you found today's secret in the background, write down the time and location in the comments. And if you are the first one to do so, then I will pin you to the top. And I will see you again later.